There is a plant that defies every survival rule we have been taught. It thrives where sunlight never reaches. It produces food every single month of the year. And it multiplies so aggressively that one cutting becomes a forest in 18 months. For centuries, it fed entire civilizations in places too dark for crops to grow. Then it vanished from Western tables, not because it stopped producing, not because it lost its power, but because a plant that grows in total darkness, feeds without limit, and costs nothing to maintain cannot generate profit. And what cannot be controlled must be forgotten. This is the story of the shadow crop that survived plagues, fed prisoners of war, and still grows wild in the places we are not supposed to look. Before we uncover what they buried, if this knowledge matters to you, the way to protect it is simple. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs to remember, and stay until the end. What you are about to learn changes everything about food security. The vault opens in the mountains of Southeast Asia, 15,000 years ago. Long before rice, before wheat, before any grain touched human lips, there was taro. Colocasia esculenta, the elephant ear plant. In the volcanic slopes of Papua New Guinea, archaeological digs uncovered taro cultivation sites dating back to 9000 BCE. Older than Mesopotamian wheat, older than Egyptian barley. This was humanity's first deliberate crop, and it grew in shadows. The Polynesians called it kalo. When they loaded double-hulled canoes and sailed into the unknown Pacific, they brought three things: breadfruit, coconut, and taro. No rice, no wheat, just taro. Because taro does not need sun, it needs water and shade. The voyagers who discovered Hawaii, Easter Island, and New Zealand survived on taro. It was planted first, before shelters were built, before fires were lit. The corm, the swollen underground stem, could be harvested in 6 months or left in the ground for 2 years. It did not rot. It did not spoil. It waited. In Hawaii, taro was not just food. It was family. The Hawaiian creation story says the firstborn child of the Sky Father and Earth Mother was stillborn. They buried him, and from his body grew the first taro plant, haloa. The second child, also named Haloa, became the ancestor of all Hawaiians. Taro was the elder brother. To eat it was communion with ancestors, with land, with the divine. Taro fed the Hawaiian Islands for over 1,000 years before Europeans arrived. The wetland taro fields called lo'i covered valleys and terraces of shimmering water. Each lo'i was an ecosystem: taro in the center, fish in the water, ducks overhead, and algae fertilizing the roots. 1 acre of lo'i produced more calories than 2 acres of wheat and required no fertilizer, no plowing, and no machines. Just water flowing from mountain to sea, carrying life. The leaves, called luau, were eaten as greens. The corm was pounded into poi, a purple paste that fermented and lasted weeks without refrigeration. Poi was pre-digested by fermentation. Babies, elders, and the sick could eat it when they could eat nothing else. It saved lives during famines and healed during plagues. But taro's true power was not discovered in the Pacific. It was hidden in West Africa. In the 1500s, Portuguese slavers sailing the coast of what is now Ghana encountered something strange: massive plantations in total forest shade. No clearing, no sun, just green tunnels of leaves beneath the canopy where crops should not exist. The Akan people were growing taro, called cocoyam, in the darkest parts of the rainforest. The Portuguese wrote in their logs that these people grew food where no European crop could survive. They did not understand. European agriculture required sun, fields were cleared, forests were enemies. But the Akan knew a secret. Taro does not just tolerate shade, it prefers it. Under the canopy, with 70% of sunlight blocked, taro thrives. The leaves grow larger to capture what little light exists. The corms swell faster because the plant does not waste energy fighting heat. In full sun, taro survives. In shade, it dominates. And it produces year-round. Unlike wheat, which grows in seasons, or rice, which requires specific flooding schedules, taro grows continuously. Plant a corm in January, harvest in July. Plant another in March, harvest in September. Stagger plantings, and you harvest every month forever. No hunger season, no waiting. Just endless food from the shadows. The Akan were not alone. Across Central Africa, the Congo, and Cameroon, taro fed millions in places too wet, too shaded, too dense for anything else. When the Atlantic slave trade began, slavers needed cheap food to keep captives alive during the Middle Passage. Taro was chosen. It grew fast, stored well, and required no expertise. Enslaved Africans carried taro knowledge across the ocean. In the Caribbean, it became dasheen. In the American South, it was called edo. Plantation owners planted it in the swampy lowlands where rice would not grow, in the shaded gullies where corn died. Enslaved communities grew it in secret gardens, in stolen moments, in places overseers would not look. Taro became survival food, resistance food, the crop that could not be controlled because it grew where masters did not go. But in the 1800s, something shifted. Industrial agriculture was born. The philosophy was simple: control nature, maximize yield, and eliminate variables. Crops that required sun could be measured, predicted, and taxed. Crops that grew in shade, in forests, in hidden places could not. Taro required wetlands, which were drained for sugarcane. It required shade, which was cleared for cotton. It required knowledge passed elder to child, not written in manuals. So it was erased. Not banned, not destroyed, just ignored. Funding went to rice, to wheat, to potatoes. Taro was called primitive, inefficient, unsuitable for modern markets. By 1900, it had nearly vanished from American agriculture. But in the Pacific, it endured. When Japan invaded the Philippines in 1942, they seized all rice. Filipinos starved in the cities. In the mountains, communities survived on gabi, the local taro. It grew in the forest shade where Japanese patrols would not venture. It could be harvested quietly, without the noise of threshing rice. Resistance fighters carried dried taro as rations. It kept them alive for 3 years of occupation. In the Marshall Islands, after the United States detonated 67 nuclear bombs between 1946 and 1958, the soil became poisonous. Coconut palms died, breadfruit withered. But taro survived. It absorbed less radiation than other crops. Communities on contaminated atolls ate taro and survived when scientists said nothing should grow there. Taro does not yield to logic. It yields to persistence. In Vietnam, during the war, the Ho Chi Minh Trail was bombed daily. Supply lines were severed. North Vietnamese soldiers survived on Quai Mon, taro, grown in the jungle shade beside the trail. American pilots could not see it from the air. Defoliants like Agent Orange killed trees, but taro, low to the ground and fast-growing, regenerated in months, a plant designed for apocalypse. The Vietnamese understood something Western agriculture refuses to accept: that resilience is not about domination. It is about adaptation. Taro adapted to bombs, to chemicals, to war. It grew in craters filled with rainwater. It spread through tunnels where soldiers hid. And when the war ended, when the land was scarred and poisoned, taro healed the soil. The roots broke up compacted earth. The leaves composted into fertility. Within a decade, forests returned where taro had grown. The plant did not just survive, it restored. So why do so few people know this? Why is taro absent from grocery stores, from gardens, from survival manuals in the West? The answer is storage. Taro corms spoil within days of harvest unless processed. They cannot sit in warehouses. They cannot survive transcontinental shipping. Supermarkets demand crops that last weeks on shelves under fluorescent lights. Taro refuses. It must be eaten fresh, dried into flour, or fermented into poi. All methods require labor, knowledge, time. Industrial food has no patience for any of those. Then there is the oxalate problem. Raw taro contains calcium oxalate crystals. Eat it uncooked and your mouth burns, your throat swells. For centuries, this was not a problem. Every culture that grew taro knew to cook it. Boiling, steaming, baking destroys the crystals. But modern food culture demands convenience. Crops you can eat raw. Taro requires respect, preparation, knowledge. So it is called dangerous, difficult, primitive. The same words used to bury every indigenous crop that refuses shortcuts. But the science tells a different story. Taro contains 112 calories per 100 grams, higher than potatoes, 30 grams of carbohydrates, mostly complex starches that digest slowly, 2 grams of fiber, potassium at 484 milligrams, magnesium, iron, vitamin E, and vitamin C. The leaves are even richer. 6 grams of protein per 100 grams, more than spinach, and loaded with vitamin A, folate, and calcium. Studies in the 1990s found that taro has one of the smallest starch granules of any crop. Small granules mean easy digestion. People with irritable bowel disease, Crohn's, celiac, they tolerate taro when they cannot tolerate wheat or rice. Hospitals in Hawaii and Samoa use poi for patients recovering from surgery. It is hypoallergenic, alkaline, and gentle. Medical researchers in the early 2000s discovered something else. Taro contains resistant starch, the kind that feeds beneficial gut bacteria. Populations that eat taro regularly show lower rates of colon cancer, diabetes, and inflammatory bowel diseases. The fermented poi Hawaiians made was a probiotic centuries before the word existed. Every spoonful contained millions of beneficial bacteria. Elders knew this intuitively. They fed poi to infants as first food, to the sick as medicine, to athletes before competition. The knowledge was empirical, tested across generations, refined through observation. No laboratories needed, no clinical trials. Just centuries of keeping people alive. And taro resists pests naturally. The calcium oxalate crystals that burn human mouths also deter insects, rats, and fungi. Farmers growing taro use almost no pesticides. In Fiji, a study compared taro farms to rice paddies. Rice required 14 chemical applications per season. Taro required none. The plant defends itself. It does not need corporations to survive. Then there is water. Taro grows in wetlands, yes, but it purifies water as it grows. The roots filter nitrogen, phosphorus, and heavy metals. Wastewater treatment plants in Hawaii and Thailand use taro to clean sewage naturally. What flows in dirty flows out clean. The plant heals as it feeds. Rice paddies flood and drain, eroding soil. Taro holds water, preventing floods downstream. In an age of climate chaos, this is not a minor detail. This is infrastructure. In Bangladesh, where floods destroy rice crops annually, farmers are experimenting with taro in low-lying areas. The plant survives submersion for weeks. When waters recede, taro keeps growing. Rice rots. Taro persists. A 2018 study in the Delta region found that switching just 20% of rice paddies to taro increased food security by 40% in flood years. But aid organizations still promote rice. Why? Because rice has supply chains, international markets, and corporate investment. Taro has none of these. So farmers are told to plant the crop that fails, while the crop that succeeds is ignored. In the 2000s, something unexpected happened. Taro began returning. Not through governments or corporations, but through diaspora communities. Pacific Islanders in New Zealand, Hawaiians in California, West Africans in London, they started growing taro in backyards, in urban lots, in places locals said nothing would grow. Farmers markets in Auckland sell taro every weekend. Samoan families in Salt Lake City grow it in kiddie pools filled with soil and water. It works. One corm becomes 12 in 8 months. In 2015, a food sovereignty movement began in Hawaii. Native Hawaiians reclaimed loe abandoned for a century. They cleared invasive species, rebuilt stone terraces, and replanted kalo, not for profit, for identity, for independence. Within 5 years, dozens of lo'i were restored. Taro harvests fed schools, elders, and families who could not afford groceries. The movement spread. In Samoa, in Tahiti, in Tonga, communities rejected imported rice and returned to taro. They remembered what colonization tried to erase. Taro is not just food, it is sovereignty. But resistance came. In the 2000s, biotech companies attempted to patent genetically modified taro. They claimed it was to resist disease. Hawaiian activists knew better. Patents mean ownership. Ownership means control. Control means the end of seed saving, of sharing, of abundance. Protests erupted. In 2006, the University of Hawaii halted GMO taro trials. The people won. Taro remained free. But the fight revealed the pattern. Corporations do not want crops that people can grow without them. They want dependency. Taro offers the opposite. Today, climate change is killing the crops that feed the world. Wheat fails in heat. Rice drowns in floods. Corn withers in drought. But taro adapts. In Vanuatu, after Cyclone Pam destroyed 96% of crops in 2015, taro regenerated in 3 months. Farmers replanted corm fragments, and by harvest season, food returned. No aid needed. No imports. Just taro doing what it has done for 15,000 years. Surviving. Scientists are finally paying attention. Research teams in Japan, India, and Ghana are studying taro for marginal lands. Places too wet, too shaded, too acidic for other crops. Taro grows there. A 2020 study found that taro could replace 30% of rice consumption in Southeast Asia using land currently considered unproductive. That is hundreds of millions of people fed without clearing a single forest. But there is no funding, no incentive, because taro cannot be owned. It spreads through corms, not seeds. One plant becomes 100. Farmers save corms and replant. No purchases, no patents, no profit. The leaves also tell a story forgotten in the West. In Samoa, taro leaves are called talo leaves, cooked in coconut cream with onions and salt. In Trinidad, they make kalalu, a stew of dashin leaves, okra, and peppers. In the Philippines, laying is taro leaves simmered in chili and shrimp paste. Every Pacific and African culture has a version. Greens that grow year-round in shade, packed with protein and vitamins. But in the United States, grocery stores do not sell them. Why? Because leaves wilt in hours. They cannot be shipped across continents. They must be eaten fresh, grown locally, prepared with care. Everything industrial food opposes. And yet, taro leaves are one of the most nutritious greens on earth. More calcium than kale. More iron than spinach, more protein than lettuce. But you will not see them in salad mixes. You will not see them in health food aisles. Because they require proximity. They require knowing a farmer. They require breaking the supply chain. Taro teaches the lesson empires hate. You do not need them. Not for food, not for seeds, not for survival. You need water, shade, and knowledge. All three exist outside markets. All three are free. In the 1970s, during the Khmer Rouge genocide in Cambodia, cities were emptied. Millions were forced into labor camps. Rice was seized. Farms were collectivized. 2 million people starved. But in the forests, hidden communities survived on wild taro. It grew along rivers, in swamps, in places soldiers would not patrol. Families dug corms at night and boiled them in secret. Taro kept them alive when the state wanted them dead. No crop that powerful should be forgotten. The same story repeats across history. During the Irish potato famine, taro was proposed as a replacement. It was rejected. Too foreign. Too strange. 1 million people died. In the Bengal famine of 1943, taro grew wild in the wetlands. Authorities ignored it. 3 million died. In the Ethiopian famine of 1984, taro was abundant in the highlands. Aid organizations shipped wheat instead. Hundreds of thousands died. Every time, the answer was already growing. Every time, the systems built around control refused to see it. Why does this keep happening? Because famine is not about lack of food, it is about lack of access. Taro gives access. It grows where institutions do not reach. It spreads without authorization. It feeds without transactions. For systems built on scarcity and control, that is unacceptable. So taro is ignored, underfunded, and erased from curriculums. Agriculture students graduate without hearing its name. Survivalists stockpile freeze-dried meals and never learn the crop that grows in their backyard shade. But some remember. In Costa Rica, small farmers grow taro, called ñampi, in the shade under banana trees. 2 crops, 1 plot. Bananas provide shade and income. Taro provides food security. When hurricanes destroy bananas, taro survives underground. When markets crash, taro keeps families fed. It is the safety net woven into the land itself. In Kerala, India, taro, called chembu, grows in the monsoon shade of coconut plantations. Women harvest it year-round, selling corms in village markets. It is not exported, it is not industrialized. It just feeds people quietly, the way it has for millennia. In Ghana, cocoyam is making a comeback. Young farmers, frustrated by imported rice and failing corn, are returning to taro. They grow it in degraded forests where nothing else survives. The crop stabilizes soil, prevents erosion, and produces food in 9 months. No fertilizer, no pesticides, just corms planted in shade. Agricultural extension officers, trained in Green Revolution methods, called it backward. But the farmers know better. When climate shocks hit, their taro survives. The modern crops do not. This is the future whether we accept it or not. Monocultures are failing. Chemical-dependent crops are collapsing. The answer is not more control, it is less. It is crops like taro that grow in the margins, in the shade, in the forgotten places. Crops that do not need us to succeed. Crops that survived 15,000 years because they adapt, because they persist, because they do not require perfection. Taro teaches through shadows. It shows that abundance does not require sunlight, that food security does not require markets, that survival does not require permission. These are dangerous lessons for systems built on dependency. So taro was hidden, not destroyed, just made invisible, removed from history books, deleted from agricultural research, dismissed as ethnic food, niche crop, relic of the past. But you cannot kill something that grows in the dark. Taro is still here, in the wild wetlands of Louisiana, in the backyard ponds of Hawaii, in the shaded ravines of Jamaica, waiting. 1 corm is all it takes. Plant it in a bucket of soil and water. Set it in the shade. In 8 months, you will have 12 corms. Plant those, and you will have 100. In 2 years, you will have more food than you can eat. And it will keep producing, year after year. No replanting, no resowing, just harvesting. The propagation is almost absurdly simple. Take a corm, any size. Cut it into sections, each with at least 1 growth node. Let the cuts dry for a day. Plant in wet soil 2 inches deep. Water daily. That is it. No seed catalogs, no genetic purity, no intellectual property. Just a corm and water and time. In tropical climates, harvest in 6 months. In temperate zones, 8 to 10. The plant tells you when it is ready. The leaves yellow, the stems soften. Dig gently and the corm lifts from the earth, white and dense and ready. And here is what they do not want you to know. You do not have to harvest the whole plant. Take the corm. Leave the roots and base. It regrows. One plant becomes a perpetual source. In Polynesia, sacred loei were never fully harvested. Elders took what was needed and left the rest. The patch persisted for generations, feeding great-grandchildren of the original planter. This is how food worked before ownership, before extraction, before the idea that harvest means killing the plant. In Fiji, there is a tradition called the karakere. If your neighbor's taro patch is abundant and yours failed, you ask for corms. They give. No payment, no debt, just reciprocity. Because next season, your patch might thrive and theirs might fail. The system works when crops cannot be hoarded, when abundance is shared, when survival depends on community. Taro enforces this. You cannot stockpile fresh corms for years. You cannot monopolize the harvest. You share or it rots. This is why colonial administrators hated it. This is why it was replaced with rice, which can be stored, controlled, taxed. The Japanese understood this during their occupation of Micronesia. They forced islanders to replace taro with rice, not for nutrition, for control. Rice requires milling, which requires infrastructure, which requires authority. Taro requires none of that. A family with a taro patch is independent. An island of taro growers cannot be starved into submission. So taro was banned, its cultivation punishable. When the war ended, the first thing communities did was replant taro, not as defiance, as survival. Modern urban growers are rediscovering this independence. In Los Angeles, a community garden in Watts grows taro in kiddie pools. Haitian immigrants, Filipino families, and Pacific Islander communities share corms and knowledge. No permits needed, just neighbors teaching neighbors. In New York, a rooftop in Queens grows taro in repurposed barrels. The grower is Bangladeshi, carrying knowledge from delta wetlands to concrete towers. He harvests year-round under shade cloths. His neighbors ask for cuttings. Within 2 years, a dozen rooftops grow taro. No grocery stores, no supply chains. This is the pattern emerging worldwide. Not farms, but patches, backyards, edges. The spaces industrial agriculture ignores, and taro thrives there. Cities have wet spots in abundance, drainage ditches, stormwater ponds, shaded north sides of buildings. These are taro's domains. The research establishment struggles with this. Taro resists replication. Every microclimate is different. Every corm variety adapts to specific conditions. 15,000 years of localized adaptation created thousands of varieties, each tuned to its environment. Science calls this inefficiency. Farmers call it resilience. When disease sweeps through, it kills uniform crops. The potato blight devastated potatoes because every plant was genetically identical. Taro has never experienced this. Too much diversity. A blight that kills one variety leaves others untouched. This is the opposite of modern agriculture, which breeds uniformity and pays the price in fragility. There are over 300 named varieties of taro in Hawaii alone. Some thrive in deep water. Others prefer shallow mud. Some produce massive corms. Others produce many small ones. Farmers knew which variety for which loei, which soil, which season. This knowledge was not written. It was lived, passed parent to child in the act of planting. That is the secret they hid. Not that taro is hard to grow, that it is too easy, that once you start, you never need to buy food again, that it grows where their crops fail, that it turns shade, the absence of value, into abundance. If this opens something, subscribe now, hit the bell. Share this with someone who needs to know that food security does not come from stores. The next vault opens soon, and what we uncover will change everything you thought you knew about survival.